All right, students, I thought I would go through and make a little video about this lab called the Class Trait Survey for anybody who's not in my Zoom meeting, or maybe somebody who wants to go back and make sure they're doing this correctly. But anyway, I'll be talking about the same stuff in class. There's one TEK now that has to do with genetics. That's our next unit here. And it's this. It says define heredity, right? And it gives you the definition. As the passage of genetic instructions from one generation to the next, that's what heredity is. So our survey, um, and this lab, and it is going to be a lab, and I'm going to give you actually 2 lab grades from this, but the objective is understand that traits occur in a variety of combinations in any given group of people. So for our purposes, each class is going to be a population, a small population, but it's going to be a population. Each class is going to get their own data. Um, So that's our group of people. And then some common traits are determined by genes that are passed from parent to child through the laws of probability. That's most of your traits that you see physically, right? Even the ones you don't see. Many of these inherited traits are easily observable, and that's these. These are single gene traits, which means it's fairly easy to trace back to which parent gave it to you, unless both of your parents, have the dominant gene. And we're going to talk more about dominant and recessive here in a little bit. The background is the first one is many characteristics of an organism are inherited from the parents of the organism, but other characteristics result from an individual's interactions with the environment, right? So nurture versus nature. A lot of times it's called that. There's some things that influence you that are environmental and not genetic, but more and more scientists are finding out that the majority of the things that influence us, both physically and emotionally, mentally, all those things really can be boiled down to genetics. But there are some environmental factors. Inherited characteristics include the presence of freckles, right? Color of flowers, because it's not just humans we're talking about here, but all organisms. Hair color, height, etc. All those kinds of things would be things that you would inherit from your parents. Other features, such as the ability to ride a bicycle, master a game, or excelling at athletics, are a combination of learned interactions with the environment, which cannot be inherited, and then inherited traits. And I always like to kind of focus on that being athletic. So you can practice at something a lot, right? Maybe it's a sport, maybe it's riding that bicycle or some sort of game or whatever. You can practice at it a lot and you might get better. There's no question that practice helps with that, right? If you work hard at it, you're going to improve. But there are some individuals that are just born naturally gifted with the ability to do those things. And maybe you work at it like crazy and you only get so far, and somebody else just kind of steps in and barely does anything, and they're already really good at it. There's a genetic factor there. There are individuals in pro sports whose fathers played pro sports, and you can say, well, they were exposed to it at an early age, and that's true. And maybe they even were hung around other pros at an early age. That's true. But when you end up having multiple offspring of these uh, pro athletes that end up being pros themselves, there's a genetic aspect to that. It's not just environment, it's a combination of the two. You definitely inherit a more natural athletic ability, that kind of thing. And it doesn't mean these people don't work hard to get where they are, but a lot of people can work hard and don't end up being pro athletes. There is a genetic aspect to that. All right, so here's the part that you're going to be collecting your own data, right? And part one says count and record your total number of classmates. Well, you don't know that yet because I got to wait and see how many classmates participate. I'm hoping it's going to be everybody. I doubt that. In every one of my classes, I'm going to probably have a few people that don't participate, but we're going to go by what we have. And you participating is going to be a big deal here because it's going to affect your grade if you don't. All right, so I'm encouraging you by telling you that this is going to have a lot to do with your grade. Then it says use a mirror to determine which of the traits you have. So if you don't have anybody else in your house right now that they can tell you, oh, you have that, or you're not aware that you have that, then look in the mirror. On some of these, you can see some of them you might already know you have. Um, Well, if we were in class on a normal basis, we have people pairing up and they can look at each other and say, "Oh yeah, you got this, or you got a smile dimple, or you have widow's peak, or whatever." But you can look at these if you're at home on your own. You can look at these in the mirror and be able to tell. And maybe you've never thought about some of these. Maybe you have. That differs for a lot of people. But I'll tell you that you have a dominant side, right here, and you have the recessive side here. Because you have a dominant trait does not mean that you are better than somebody else. It just means that that trait shows up more often in a population. The recessive trait shows up less often in a population. So it doesn't make somebody a better individual or smarter or tougher or whatever. Don't be ashamed of whatever trait you have. You have no control of that. That's what your parents passed on to you, and that's what it is. Um, I'll say that in the populations here in San Antonio, we tend to get the opposite here. When you're expecting to see more of the dominant trait with some of these, it's going to end up being recessive, being more or higher in number than the dominant trait. And that just has to do with regional aspects, right? So maybe some part of the world, earlobes being free earlobes is dominant. Um, in other parts of the world, maybe they're not. Or hair on fingers, or one of those things that's it's considered to be a dominant trait, might not be dominant in this particular part of the world. And so I'm not sure how they determined that. It's probably worldwide statistics, but you'll see that we're going to have at least half of these aren't going to be the way they're supposed to turn out. Anyway, all you're having to do on yours is drag one of these circles over to whichever one you have, and um, I'll go through what some of these are if you're not sure. So, free earlobes and attached earlobes. The dominant is the free earlobe. So you have this kind of hanging lobe here, right? You can see that. And most people have that. However, attached earlobes are the other option here. And some people have those. And you usually get, maybe 75-25, something like that. That usually ends up being the case. Free lobes are dominant around in this population. The next one is hair on fingers. And we're not talking about your upper fingers, but your lower ones down are closer to your last knuckle, closer to your nails. You can just see the hair right there. That's what I'm talking about. If you have hair, you can see it on this finger here too. If you have hair on that part of your fingers, right, not higher up, but right on that part. Widow's peak, right? So that little kind of dip down in the center of the forehead where your hair comes down, like your hairline, that's called a widow's peak. Everybody's seen, the old pictures of Dracula, the real pronounced point. Most people don't have that, but somebody like Chris Hemsworth has the widow's peak. And then here's the other thing where your hairline just goes straight across, so it's no widow's peak, right? It's widow's peak present actually, widow's peak absent on the other. I forget what that actor's name is, but anyway. Um, Straight hair or curly or even wavy hair. If you have even a little bit of wave to your hair, then you're going to choose that one. Uh, Absolute straight hair tends to be kind of uh, the recessive trait in most populations. Not all, just depends on what part of the world you're in, but most people have at least a little bit of wave in their hair. It's not going to be absolutely straight, but if you have absolutely straight hair, then and that's what you put down. But even if you have a little bit of wave, then you're going to put down curly hair. Uh, the cleft chin, right? So you can see that pretty pronounced on this guy. Not always that pronounced. Sometimes it's a little more subtle. And girls can have it also. So there you go. That's cleft chin. It's supposed to be dominant. I think that's going to be one of the ones that we find out is not dominant in this population, as I see it every year. Smile dimples, right? And we're talking about those, like right there on the cheek. There, there, not the crease, not that one, guys. That's a crease on the side of your mouth. Smile dimple is going to be on the cheek over here. Even she has actually a smile dimple, but it's over here, not the crease in your mouth. All right. Tongue rolling. And tongue rolling uh, is a genetic thing, especially this kind of thing. That is something you inherit. Now, this type of tongue rolling, people can practice that and get good enough at it to show that they can roll their tongue. You can work at doing that, but you can't work at doing this one. All right. So if you can roll, and some people can do this but can't do this. I think it's two different genes. But if you can roll your tongue and it's a natural thing for you, you know you didn't just practice that over and over and over for months and months and months till you got it down. If you know you could do that easily, then it's a genetic thing. You know that's what it is. Um, and then finally, the clasping of hands, right? So some people clasp their hands and the left thumb naturally goes over the right thumb. And other people, they clasp their hands and their right thumb goes over the left thumb, right? So it's one or the other. The left thumb happens to be the dominant trait, and the right thumb happens to be the recessive trait. All right. So this is going to be real important. That's why I said this next step is very important for your lab grade. This has to do with the class results, the class data. All right. So you're going to fill in this Google form and let me know which traits you have. This is for class data, and all members of the class will need these numbers. Don't worry, I will not be sharing what traits any students have. So I'm not going to be saying, hey, look, Susie had this. She's got the cleft chin, or Johnny has the widow's peak. None of that, guys. It's just about numbers, and nobody needs to know what you have. You know, if you're sitting in my class and other people can see it, well, that's different. But you at home, um, don't worry. You're just submitting that to me. I'm just putting it in as class data. I'm not putting whose name is attached to that particular trait or anything. And all you're going to do is click on this link and bring up the form, and every one of those 8 traits is up there, and you're just telling me which one you have, right? And then submit it. I need you to do that today, right? On this day, as soon as you get this, because I want to get that class data ready to go for the next time we meet, and then I'll be able to share those numbers because the next couple of slides are you entering that class data. The number of students that had the free earlobe, the percent that had it, the number of students that had attached earlobe, and the percent for our class. All right, so we're going to be doing that. Those first 4, then the second 4 for the total of 8. And that's going to be the data collection. I'm gonna actually share a graph with you guys based on the class data. So you're going to add that to your slides. And you're going to have an analysis where you have to answer questions. And almost all those questions are going to be based on the class data. So you need to have those numbers, guys. So you're going to get 2 lab grades out of this. The first part is you collecting this or actually filling in this data. So as soon as you can, you're going to fill out that form and submit it so that I have your data and I can add it to the class. All right, guys.